From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello. Welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Alexis, codename Doc Holliday Jackson. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this stuff they don't want you to know. If you are a long-time or habitual listener, first, thank you. Secondly, you know that this is our listener mail portion of the week. This is where we take a big stew of all these voicemails, all these emails, all those weird messages scrawled on our mirrors in the dark by invisible hands of your fellow listeners. We share them with you. Today we've got some great stuff. We've got some stuff about Mattress firm update that we were not expecting. We've got, I think, a very well-intentioned series of questions about Parler, and we've got some mind-blowing stuff about the nature of reality, if you want to be pretentious about it, and the Latitude Society. So off mic, folks, Matt and Noel and codename Doc and I, we usually spend a few minutes shooting the breeze before we get into this and talking about how we feel we should order these things. We do our best to make it feel like a cohesive, coherent thing, not too many downers, not too many uppers, I guess, either. But Matt, this correspondence you received, I think we all agreed this was something that was worth responding to. What do you think?
Oh, for sure. Two things. We all received it, Mr. Bolin. But second thing, paramount to any discussions on order of how we're going to do this is that we are all really hungry and want chicken wings from the local. If you're in Atlanta, go to the local. For the love of God,
Get to the local.
The local has done so much for our show. We know everyone who works there. It's the pandemic days, so we don't get there too often. But back in the day, I would say, without hyperbole, we did some of our best brainstorming at the local. I don't know if we all remembered all of it the next day.
I'll tell you what I do remember, though, is dry rub lemon pepper wings.
No.
Sun-dried
tomato.
That's the one. No, that's the one. Dry rub, sun-dried. Thank you. Sun-dried, dry rub. But this time, if I do this crazy thing that I'm contemplating doing after we record, I'm going to do half dry and half wet. Whoa.
Go for it. Who's going to stop you?
All right.
Carpe diem.
Yeah, carpe diem. We're so hungry. Oh, yeah.
Wait, one more thing, though, because we are talking about a place that we all love and miss dearly, including codename Doc is in on this, too, also a local fan. I do want to point out, you guys, that some of those folks do listen to this show. And I know that because pre-pandemic, when it was like our happy hour spot, every so often, one of our friends who works there would come in and like talk trash to us if we had not done well on an episode.
Slap us around a little bit, even.
Well, it's good.
It's snarky cheers.
Real world iTunes reviews in real time. I dig it. So speaking of a kind of review, that's what this next message is. But it's also it's coming from a very good place, and I think it's worth us all contemplating it. So we're going to do that together now.
Hey guys, long time listener. Love what you do. Love your stance. I will say that I feel like, and I'm not supportive of anything that happened in the Capitol. I think it's horrendous to the U.S. government. This happened to face geopolitically. But I feel like the commentary and discussion on Parler, nor was I a member, nor do I support it, about it being a free market, belies the fact that Twitter was effectively used in a similar manner in Egypt and during the Arab Spring riots to overthrow a government. And I feel like we're in a blurry line of social media, yes, being private industry, but if you go on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you're going to see the influence of political messaging in that interlude. So to draw a firm line in one case for one platform, while at the same time numerous articles from Jack Dorsey on Twitter referring to his engagement, involvement, and basically relationship of Twitter to government and political change, I don't think that conversation was fully fleshed out enough. I love basically all that you do. I work for a fintech company. I feel like there are issues with scalability. You could go on Instagram now and find the heading of the heading. You could go find any number of racial, geopolitical, violent, gore posts because of the inability of tech companies to police their own systems of scalability. But I feel like that conversation of the relationship of pervasive influence of social media is not an accurate analogy to compare it to no shirts, no shoes, no service, because me sliding down the slide at McDonald's backwards did not have the potential to politically influence the Democratic population. Keep doing what you're doing. I love it. My 2 cents.
Man, I think our boy was on a jog there.
Definitely running his bottom off. He was working.
Guys, we made that point though, I have to say, about the Arab Spring thing and the comparison. We would definitely discuss that angle.
We did make that point, and oftentimes people will call in. Maybe you'll call in the middle of an episode, or after the discussion kind of begins to kick off, and give us some input before we conclude some things, and that does happen sometimes. Well, I'm not exactly sure if that's the case here, but I think the biggest point, and I don't mean to speak for you, person who just called in to tell us this, but it feels like the biggest point here is about scalability of kind of open platforms, like social media platforms that are based on the concept of anyone being able to post anything and exercise their freedom of speech. And then, so starting at that place of openness and then attempting to scale in order to make a profitable business. And the major problems within that system, essentially.
It's interesting though, because it's like, it's hard to have it both ways with the system that we currently have, where on the one hand, this is a privately owned company, that has the right, it has terms of services and has the right to interpret those terms of services. And then you even have I think it's Facebook that has almost like an independent review board to make decisions so that they can kind of say, okay, we have this board that's making these decisions, so it's not just us. It's not happening in a vacuum. But at the same time, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all these companies, they are private companies that people can choose to be a part of. But Caller is absolutely right. There comes a point where that genie is out of the bottle, or we cross some line and they're no longer just a private company. They absolutely have this scale of influence that's really, really difficult to control when you just treat them in that way. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I'd go further here. So first off, Anonymous, thank you so much, man. This kind of stuff is something that I really appreciate, because these are questions made in good faith. And you're doing one of the best things an audience can do for any show. Even a little show like ours, you're keeping us honest. And I appreciate the opportunity to return to this exploration. It's a Gordian knot, it's a capital D dilemma. Because Parler, you're right. The way that we talked about Parler, to Noel's point, we hit some of those points you mentioned, but we also talked about the preponderance of these extremist beliefs on that network. And we talked about the problem of private entities. I will say this, by the way, I think most people would be surprised just how in the pocket of government many social media outlets are. Five Eyes never went away. You know what I mean? And while this stuff may seem like a cool, neat community to us, we've got that slot machine addiction mentality. How many likes do I get on my post? We have to understand it's a very different thing to governments. Social media is a weapon, and it is naive to assume that it would not be used as such by a large state-level entity with the ability or the opportunity to do so. With that in mind, Parler itself, if you look at Parler, it doesn't bill itself as some kind of extremist Nazi Twitter, their official stance is / was no censorship, full stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're like the social media platform of free speech is kind of how they're positioning themselves, and understandably so, given what's going on with the other platforms. So they have kind of a niche they're jumping in to fill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think we talked about this years and years ago, and it still strikes me as so true. We used to dive into 4chan when we had to get some really weird research. And 4chan is one of the best arguments against true democracy right now. Matt, I see your face there. What do I mean by that? I mean, it's government of the masses. Anyone can post, right? In theory, before a bunch of changes were made, and you see democracy, but you don't see accountability because people can be relatively anonymous. And maybe that's part of the puzzle. Maybe that's a missing piece here. Maybe there's a world where people can go onto censorship-free platforms, but have to have their own identities, some sort of transparency. But then again, that's such overreach, is it not? Like it's a crazy amount of Big Brother.
Also, we know how difficult it is to actually prove that someone, quote unquote, incited behavior, right? So at what point, where's the sniff test? Where is the hard line in the sand, whether morally or just contextually, of what constitutes hate speech? This body that Facebook has employed, they determined that some posts that were flagged were in fact not hate speech. So the fact that it's a question to begin with is interesting. And so it's to the caller's point, it's where is the line in the sand? How do we know unequivocally this is being censored because it's actually inciting? Because you know what I mean? Because then it starts to be just about closing off certain ideologies that are maybe less appealing to you.
That's another point. Okay, to the point about defining incitement. If the local gets overrun by a ravenous mob, right, chasing chicken wings, is that our fault? Because we just talked kind of in depth about how much we like the place.
We just said they were really good.
Yeah, but we didn't tell people, go now.
Well,
right?
we did say get ye to the local. We did say that.
We did literally say that.
But
still,
I said that, and I take full responsibility.
Oh, great.
all right, Mr. Kennedy. But still, at what point does the critical mass take over? We planted the seed, but are we responsible for the outcome? If we literally just said chicken wings are great, go get you some chicken wings at our favorite spot. And then all of a sudden, if it becomes a matter of the scale of our audience, and then maybe we were irresponsible with asking our entire audience. And then all of a sudden, how are we to know that everyone would go all at once? And there'd be a run on chicken wings.
Guys, I'm just going to pat myself on the back for making that our earlier local reference applicable. So it's not just us talking about these, again, amazing chicken wings.
I'm with you.
We are not sponsored by the local.
Smoke them, and they have all these different flavors.
So I do want to say too,
yeah,
we've been shredded a little bit in the iTunes comments for that episode. People almost saying that we're being apologists for these rioters, and I don't think that's fair or true at all. I mean, our job on the show is to try to have perspective, to have critical thinking when it comes to these conspiracy theories and conspiracies and conspiracy facts and events, but these are interesting questions, and it's not about whether you agree with or disagree with an ideology. The idea of where free speech begins and ends, and what these companies are and represent. Are they bigger than just a independent company? They've almost become little governments of their own.
Yes.
Oh
gosh. Oh man. Damn it. We only do one strange news segment a week. There's a bill in play right now to allow private corporations to create what are called innovation zones and to take over the functions of government that would occur in those zones. Check it out now. Use Brave or your browser of choice and look at, I believe it's Nevada, innovation zones. You're right, Noel. There is a troubling difference of opinion on the role of the government or the private entities that interact with people directly. Now, I do want to point out one thing that really made me appreciate your call, Anonymous. We did not note in our previous episode that Parler did have community guidelines. They did have a mechanism for taking down posts. They were able to ban people. So it wasn't entirely anything goes. I think every social media tycoon or would-be tycoon is aware of the great example of the problem with free speech, running into a crowded movie theater, screaming fire, and then just watching the chaos happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that free speech? Is that a crime? The problem is that free speech itself is not mutually exclusive. Like it can be free speech and still be something that is quite dangerous and meant to be dangerous. You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree.
I want to bring this back to our adventures with Facebook, if that's okay, because we've had a long relationship. The show has, at least, with Facebook, and I just want to let listeners in kind of behind the screen here, behind the camera. So originally, when we started a Facebook page for Stuff They Don't Want You to Know, it functioned very differently because of the Facebook platform and how they handled like group pages. Right, then I think it was like a fan page. I don't remember exactly what they called it, but generally we could go in and see every comment that was coming in. We could personally respond to comments. We had access to that because there was such a small pool of people that were interested in our show when we first started that page. Then as it began to grow, Ben and I remember this, Ben. I remember we would struggle to keep up with some of the stuff, but we were still able to do it. And then it got out of hand to where we had to pick and choose a moment to go in and kind of search through and decide what we could respond to. Much like right now we do with our listener mail segments, we have this large pool and we dip in and we pull some things out. Then if you scale that out even further to the point where it got so big, we had to create Here's Where It Gets Crazy, the Facebook group, which made it more manageable. And then we had to get mods for that because it got too big. And imagine doing this in this kind of scale with billions of users. And, you're attempting, you kind of have to assign humans at some point to police behaviors on social media, because only a human can make those value judgments on these things. We talked about this a bit, but when it is just by the nature of the scale, it has to be done through a program, through an algorithm, policing all the content. It just becomes completely impossible to manage.
Yeah, that's the thing. So there's the human equation is quite a difficult one to crack, which may be the most inhuman robotic stuff I've said in this episode. But the problem is this: you're right. Currently, there is no way to watch every falling sparrow of a tweet, right? On any platform, there's not a real 100% considered visibility. Human beings, it is well proven, human beings will not always outsmart algorithms, will not always outsmart software, but human beings so far will always outcreate it. They'll change the game, right? Like look at the amazing and brilliant evolution of online dissent under the reign of Xi Jinping in China. What we're seeing is people couldn't type out characters that said protest. So they went to the meme world, which is a very old, I would argue, type of communication. And then when certain memes were getting stopped, then they went to other ways of communicating, a nod and a wink. You know what I mean? A signal to those who were in the know. And then this language evolved from it. And the fascinating thing, by the way, Anonymous, you'll be interested in this. China just banned the audio app Clubhouse because people were going on this ephemeral audio app and they were speaking their minds in a way that I can only imagine the PRC found objectionable. Also, we're doing an episode on Falun Gong. It's really weird.
Ben is fully down the rabbit hole there, but it's good. It's such a good thing. You're going to be happy about it. It's going to have a good result for all of us.
We might not be able to get in after that one. I don't know.
Oh man, the show comes around every once in a while. I've been meaning to see it. Where I live in particular, that show comes through every year.
Shenyun, yeah.
Shenyun, baby.
I mean, there's memes of like Shenyun billboards on the moon. You know, it's almost like a running gag. They're just everywhere. Every coffee shop, they've got armies of these like street team people like putting up these signs.
We should all go. Let's make it a thing.
I've heard it's quite stunning.
Yeah, I always wanted to go, but the tickets are pricey.
Yeah.
And then there's the question of what exactly you're supporting.
What am I funding? Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm. But with that being said, Anonymous, we hope that we are giving a worthwhile perspective on the issues here: social media, freedom of speech, private versus public entities, or private versus state entities. And the answer right now, as far as we can tell, is that there is no silver bullet. There is no solution to this dilemma. There's nothing that solves the puzzle in a way that makes everybody agree. You know what I mean? Like overreaching governments. Again, China is a great example. Overreaching governments, their answer is domestic stability above all. Therefore, we will shut down quick, fast, in a hurry, and with great prejudice, anything that could be a threat to domestic stability, because we are doing this for the greater good. Right. And we can get into the difference between civic and economic rights versus human rights, which is a huge deal internationally. And then there's the other side, which is, let's wild out. Hashtag YOLO. Say whatever you want and consequences be damned. And it appears that neither of those extremes are particularly beneficial to people at scale, to your point, Matt, over the long term. No one knows how to fix this. We built things that we don't understand, and that's the root of the problem.
Absolutely. You're correct. And that's a good place to end it. We should end it there. I unfortunately have to leave you this just because I've got a place where you can go check out some things. Go head on over to the Harvard Business Review. It's just called Harvard Business Review. You can read some really interesting opinions about some of this stuff. And there are a couple other places online that you'll be able to find if you just do some duck going about scale and disinformation. And there's this Harvard Business Review article discusses the ad revenue model with scale and what that means and how that can be abused by bad actors. And so it's what we've talked about before a little bit, but you can really get into the nitty gritty in a couple of these articles, and we'd recommend that. Okay. Thank you again for calling in. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
And we're back with more messages from you. Yes, you, the public. Are you or are you not a member of the public? That's from a movie. I don't remember which one, but I digress. We're talking about Mattress Firm. It's a follow-up from a previous Strange News or Listener Mail episode. I forget, but this one is if you'll recall, just a quick summary, lots of mattress firms, weirdly so. One's across the street from one another. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We went through, talked about the business model, talked about how there was some weird, kind of sketchy stuff in the past of the parent company of mattress firm, Steinhoff International. We're going to get into that in a second. But, the whole conspiracy angle of Mattress Firm, it's all over the internet, is it some sort of elaborate international money laundering situation? Are all these mattresses full of drugs and or cash? That's my editorializing, but it's a reasonable question, especially given the largely moving away from showroom models with all the Caspers and the Lisas and the purple mattresses of the world. It's a little odd that there's still so many mattress firms, and we've got the inside scoop from the real estate perspective from one of the landlords of one of these rental locations of a mattress firm, and this comes from Andrew, who wrote in via email. Andrew says, "Hi guys, just listened to your recent episode talking about the mattress store conspiracy. I'm here to share a personal experience my mom encountered with none other than Mattress Firm. My mom owns various commercial real estate around northeastern Ohio. Years ago, a tenant vacated one of her properties that was on the corner of an exit ramp of a highway in a high traffic area. She decided to give the place a facelift and put it back on the market for lease. Mattress Firm approached her with something like a 6-year lease, paying above fair market value. She declined because she didn't want to deal with a big corporation. Shortly after, someone higher up at a corporate, might have been the CEO at the time, personally called her asking her to reconsider, offering her twice fair market value was for that location. She finally agreed after all this persistence.
And all that money.
I mean, that is literally an offer that would be very, very difficult to refuse. Mattress Firm moved in, and I mean to tell you, we never once saw a customer come into the store, as we would frequently pass that intersection, much like our 2 Mattress Firm locations across from each other on Moreland Avenue, a big main drag here in Atlanta. Within a year or so of being there, they abruptly called saying they needed out of their 6+ year lease. Apparently, behind the scenes, Mattress Firm had been opening an insane amount of storefronts. It was alleged that the CEO was cooking the books to appear that they were much more successful than they actually were. As a result, they were forced into bankruptcy and had to cut hundreds of retail leases. Below is a link to an article that talks about this very situation. Anyway, I thought you'd be interested. You thought right. And take care. Andrew.
Thank you so much. This Mattress Firm thing, for vivid background, it's something that Noel and Matt and I have talked about at length for a number of years. Because you know how it is when you have friends that you've known for a while. Some conversations are just conversations that kind of continue forever. And you touch base on this every so often. We did a pretty good job, I think, of walking through the possibilities here. But I don't know about you guys. This letter from Andrew is the first I heard about the CEO's shenanigans. And I believe the link you sent us is just about a little less than a year old, talking about how in February 2019, there was at least a partial make good on the fraud lawsuit. Is that correct? But not 100% fixed.
Yeah, that's correct. Freshly removed from bankruptcy, Mattress Firm partially settles fraud lawsuit. Wait a minute. What fraud lawsuit? We didn't really talk about that last time. That's because we kind of cliffhung it. If you'll recall, with, I believe, Matt, you very slyly dropped a name of Marcus Justa, who on December 5th of 2017 resigned, citing after there were allegations of accounting irregularities. The stock price plummeted 66% and ultimately would go to fall by 90%. And yeah, apparently they had done exactly what is being described here, overstating profits and assets by nearly $12 billion.
It's a lot of mattresses.
So, I mean, is this just crooked bookkeeping? Like, it seems like an unsustainable model, but to me, this starts to have the ring of something like the Madrigal Corporation in Breaking Bad, where I'm picturing, other stuff going on behind the scenes, much more nefarious stuff. But that's just where my mind goes. And if that is the case, it certainly doesn't feel like they're doing a very good job of hiding it, because, I mean, this is like everyone and their mom questions why there's so many freaking mattress firms everywhere. But this company owns lots of other, it's a holding company. This Steinhoff International. They own manufacturing facilities. They own other big box type retail spaces, mainly in Europe.
Yeah. It's how big does this go? You know what I mean? It's interesting too, because we can use the Parler example from earlier here. For a holding company of that size, it's fair to ask how closely they keep an eye on various subsidiaries or enterprises, much less individuals. Mattress Firm itself filed lawsuits against former employees, accusing them of conspiring to make the company expand. faster and further than it should. But
Well, did you see what they were doing? I'm sorry, maybe I missed it. I was kind of reading a bit here as we were discussing, guys. But did we talk about what their plan was? Like what those two guys were doing? Bruce Levy and Ryan Vinson. These were two real estate executives there. I can't remember if we talked about this in last time, but
no, if we did, it doesn't quite ring a bell. Tell us a little bit more about who these people were and how they connected up with Marcus Justa and the whole collapse.
Well, in this guy, Alexander Dietrich, I think that's the one that I mentioned. Alexander, that
Yes.
rings a bell for me.
You did.
So what these guys were doing, they were doing very similar things to what our message from Andrew said. They were paying way above regular value for leases in places across the country. And they were doing it purposefully because many times the land that they were leasing was owned by a group that one or more of these individuals actually had a controlling share over, or were a part of, or were invested in some way, so that they were just cycling that money through.